For months, Phoebe Gates appeared to be building a startup that could prove she was more than just Bill Gates' daughter. Phia attracted millions in funding, celebrity investors, and huge attention. Then came a discovery that changed everything. Investigators found evidence that the shopping app may have claimed credit for sales it did not actually generate. The company called it a coding problem, but later reports raised an even more uncomfortable question. If it was only a bug, why did internal messages appear to show the issue had been known for months? The story looked almost too perfect. Phoebe Gates was not just the daughter of Bill Gates. She wanted to build something that could stand on its own. In 2025, she and Stanford friend Sophia Canny launched Phia, an AI-powered shopping tool designed to help people find lower prices, compare products, discover discounts, and track deals. And very quickly, Phia became a serious startup. The company attracted major venture capital firms and celebrity investors. By 2026, Phia had raised about $43.5 million, with names such as Sydney Sweeney, Khloe Kardashian, Hailey Bieber, and Sheryl Sandberg connected to its funding and support. Reports also said the app had been downloaded more than 1 million times. For Phoebe, this was important. She had spent years living under one of the biggest surnames in technology. Every achievement could be questioned with the same uncomfortable thought. Did she earn this because she was talented, or because her father is Bill Gates? Phia seemed like an answer. Then, in July 2026, that image began to fall apart. Investigators reported that Phia's browser extension could insert its own affiliate tracking code during online purchases, even when shoppers had not meaningfully interacted with Phia. In simple terms, the system could potentially make Phia look like it had sent a customer to a retailer when another website or affiliate had actually done it. This practice is often called cookie stuffing. Phia said the problem was caused by a software issue in a recent release. The company said it had been alerted, worked quickly to identify the problem, and fixed it. At first, that explanation sounded simple. A mistake, a bug, a bad piece of code. But then another report appeared. Bloomberg later reported that internal Slack messages and software records suggested the questionable features may have existed months earlier, dating back to December 2025. That directly raised a much harder question. Was this really an unexpected bug, or had people inside the company known about the system for much longer? And that is where the story stops being about a young startup making a technical mistake, because the next question is much more serious. How exactly was Phia making money from these sales? And what happened when someone discovered the system was taking credit for purchases it may not have influenced? The easiest way to understand the controversy is to understand how Phia was supposed to make money in the first place. Imagine you are shopping online for a pair of shoes. You find the store through a search, a social media post, another shopping website, or an affiliate link. You eventually buy the shoes. Behind that simple purchase is a tracking system. Affiliate marketing allows a company that sends a customer to a retailer to receive a commission when that customer buys something. Phia's business model depended on this system. Its shopping assistant helped users compare prices, find discounts, and discover products. When Phia genuinely influenced a purchase, it could receive a portion of the sale through affiliate networks. That model itself is completely normal. The problem begins when a company gets credit for a sale it did not actually create. This is where the term cookie stuffing enters the story. A browser cookie can help identify which affiliate should receive credit for a sale. But according to the Bloomberg investigation reported by multiple outlets, Phia's browser extension could place or refresh its own affiliate tracking information even when the shopper had arrived through another source. That could allow Phia to override another affiliate's referral and claim the commission instead. And this wasn't a tiny side feature. Bloomberg's investigation, as reported by the New York Post, found that the disputed cookie activity represented about 51% of the merchandise value attributed to Phia before the features were disabled in July. That number changes the picture dramatically. Because if a large part of a company's reported sales comes from customers it did not actually bring in, the issue isn't simply about a few incorrect payments. It can affect how partners see the company. It can affect revenue figures. And it can affect how investors understand the health of the business. Phia has said it removed the problematic features on July 7th and began reviewing transactions so that incorrectly attributed sales could be reversed. The company also said it would bring in a compliance leader to prevent similar problems in the future. But there was one detail that made the controversy far more difficult to explain away. If this behavior appeared because of a recent software mistake, as Phia initially said, why did records reportedly show related features existing months earlier? That question takes the story from a technical problem into something much more personal. Because now, people were no longer asking only what Phia's software had done. They were asking what the founders knew about it. And the answer, according to later reporting, is where this story becomes much more explosive. The most damaging part of this story was not the first report. It was what came after. When the allegations first became public, Phia's explanation sounded like a familiar startup disaster. Something had gone wrong inside the software. The company said it had discovered the problem, removed the features, and started working to reverse transactions that had been incorrectly attributed to Phia. If that were the whole story, Phia would still have faced a serious business problem, but it would have been a very different story. A software bug can happen. Even a major bug can happen. The important questions would be how quickly the company found it, how honestly it reported it, and how much damage it caused. Then Bloomberg's follow-up investigation changed the timeline. According to reporting based on internal Slack messages, historical source code, and people familiar with the company, Phia's founders had discussed the automatic cookie-setting behavior months before the July controversy. Reports say the discussions went back to December 2025. That detail matters because it challenges the simple recent software bug explanation. One reported internal exchange involved Phoebe Gates asking developers about automatic cookie dropping. The investigation said the feature could place tracking information even when a shopper had not actively clicked on a Phia coupon or recommendation. And there was another troubling number. A Phia data scientist reportedly estimated in an internal Slack message that the disputed cookie activity represented about 51% of the merchandise value Phia claimed credit for in June. That does not automatically prove criminal wrongdoing by Phoebe Gates or anyone else. Those are allegations and reported internal records, not a court finding. But it explains why the story exploded. Because now the central question was no longer simply, did Phia's software behave incorrectly? It became, who knew about the behavior? When did they know? And what did they do after learning about it? There was also a measurable business consequence. Reports said that after the disputed features were disabled in July, Phia's average daily revenue fell sharply, from roughly $80,000 to between $10,000 and $28,000, according to figures cited from Bloomberg's reporting. That dramatic drop made the allegations even more significant. If the reported numbers are accurate, the controversial system was not some harmless piece of unused code sitting quietly in the background. It may have been connected to a substantial portion of the company's claimed affiliate activity. Phia said it is reviewing transactions and plans to reverse sales that were incorrectly attributed to the company. It also said it would add stronger compliance controls. But there was still one enormous problem. The company now had to convince investors, business partners, and the public that this was a failure of software, not a failure of judgment. And that became much harder when the people investigating the story began looking at how much money was involved, who had invested in Phia, and how quickly the company had risen before the controversy hit. That is where Phoebe Gates' famous last name suddenly became impossible to ignore. For Phia, the biggest problem was no longer the software. It was a timeline. When the first allegations surfaced in July, Phia said it had been notified about the issue and acted quickly. The company said the problematic features were removed on July 7th and that it had begun reviewing transactions to identify sales that had been incorrectly credited to Phia. That response gave the company a possible path forward. Admit the mistake, fix the technology, pay back what was wrongly received, strengthen compliance. But then came the second Bloomberg investigation. According to reporting published August 11th, internal Slack messages and software records suggested that the questionable behavior had been discussed inside Phia months before the July report. The reported timeline went back to December 2025. That is a very different story from discovering a problem only after someone outside the company points it out. And this is where we have to be careful. The reports do not establish that Phoebe Gates personally committed a crime. They describe allegations, internal communications, and evidence reviewed by journalists. There's been no court ruling finding Gates guilty of fraud, but the reported messages created a difficult question for Phia. If company leaders were discussing automatic affiliate tracking months earlier, why was the public explanation centered on a recent software problem? That question became even more important because researchers had already been able to reproduce behavior that raised concerns. Independent testing by affiliate marketing researcher Ben Edelman, along with testing reported by Bloomberg and Capital One Shopping, indicated that Phia's extension could place or refresh affiliate tracking in situations where Phia had not clearly earned the referral. In other words, this was not simply a theoretical concern. People could test extension and observe behavior that appeared to affect who received credit for a purchase. Then came another warning sign. The Federal Trade Commission had reportedly received consumer complaints about Phia months before the scandal became public. Records obtained through a Freedom of Information Act request reportedly showed complaints beginning in January 2026 involving undisclosed advertising. Again, complaints do not prove wrongdoing, but they add another piece to the timeline. And every new piece made the original explanation harder to defend. Phia now had to deal with more than angry headlines. Affiliate networks were reviewing transactions, and Impact.com temporarily suspended the company from its marketplace, while disputed commissions were examined that could threaten the very engine that made Phia profitable. Because without trusted affiliate networks, a shopping app built around affiliate commissions has a serious problem. And that brings us to the uncomfortable irony at the center of the story. Phoebe Gates had spent years saying she wanted her company judged on its own merits, not simply because of her famous family. But now the Gates name had become one of the biggest reasons the controversy was receiving so much attention. And the next question was unavoidable. How much did the Gates name help Phia rise, and how much could it now amplify the fall? By this point, the scandal had become much bigger than one browser extension. Phia had built something investors believed could become a major shopping platform. The company had attracted roughly $43.5 million in total funding, with a long list of well-known investors and celebrities connected to the business. Reports have named people including Khloe Kardashian, Paris Hilton, Sydney Sweeney, and others. That kind of attention can change how a young startup is seen. Suddenly, Phia was not just another small company trying to find customers. It had money, famous backers, a recognizable founder, and a growing user base. And that made the allegations much more damaging. The original July investigation found that Phia's extension could generate affiliate clicks without meaningful user interaction. Bloomberg's testing reportedly showed the extension opening a background tab and injecting its own referral code, potentially overriding a legitimate referral from another publisher. Then the second investigation raised the question of how long the company had known about the behavior. According to Bloomberg's later reporting, internal communications suggested the practice had been discussed as early as December 2025. That matters because the company had initially described the issue as something it discovered and fixed after being alerted. There was another number that made the situation even harder to ignore. Reports citing Bloomberg's findings said the disputed activity accounted for around 51% of the merchandise value attributed to Phia in June. After the features were disabled in July, reported daily revenue fell dramatically. If those figures hold up, the problem was deeply connected to the company's business model. But there is an important distinction. A large revenue drop does not, by itself, prove that every dollar of that revenue was fraudulent. And the public reporting does not establish that Phoebe Gates personally committed a crime. Those conclusions would require evidence and, potentially, legal proceedings. What we can say is that the controversy created a serious trust problem. Affiliate businesses survive on attribution. Retailers need to know who actually sent them customers. Publishers need to know they will receive credit when they influence a purchase. And investors need reliable information about how a company generates revenue. Once that trust is questioned, rebuilding it can take much longer than fixing a piece of code. Phia has said it removed the disputed features, began reviewing transactions, and planned to reverse improperly attributed sales. The company also said it would hire a compliance officer and improve its controls. Those steps could help, but the damage to the company's public image may be harder to repair. For Phoebe Gates, there was another layer. She had spent years trying to prove that her work should be judged independently from her family's wealth and influence. Now, the same famous surname that made Phia impossible to ignore was making every allegation impossible to escape. And just when it seemed the story could not become more complicated, another question emerged. What happens when a startup built around trust loses the very networks it needs to make money? That answer could determine whether Phia survives the scandal or whether the controversy becomes a moment that permanently changes a company. The biggest question now is not whether Phia made a mistake. It is whether the company can rebuild trust after the mistake became a much larger controversy. Phia says it removed the features responsible for the disputed tracking on July 7th, began reviewing transactions, and started reversing sales that were incorrectly attributed to the company. It also said it would bring in a compliance leader to strengthen its systems. Those are important steps, but they do not erase what happened before the fix. The latest reporting has created a sharp conflict between two versions of the story. Phia initially described the affiliate tracking problem as a software bug it discovered and corrected. Later reporting based on internal Slack messages and software records said the disputed behavior had been discussed inside the company as far back as December 2025. That difference may become the most important part of the entire controversy. Because a company can survive a technical failure, it is much harder to survive a credibility failure. And there is still a crucial distinction viewers should remember. There has been no court finding that Phoebe Gates personally committed fraud. The public reports describe allegations and internal evidence, not a criminal conviction. Legal consequences, if any, would depend on what investigators and courts ultimately establish. For now, the immediate damage is mostly business and reputational. Impact.com removed Phia from its marketplace and began redirecting commissions that had not yet been paid. Other affiliate networks have also been reviewing transactions. That creates a serious challenge for a company whose business depends on affiliate attribution. Then there is the money. Phia had raised about $43.5 million and built relationships with major investors and celebrity backers. That means the company has resources that many young startups never receive. But money cannot automatically buy back trust. And Phoebe Gates faces a second challenge that has followed her since the beginning. Her last name. Being Bill Gates' daughter gave her enormous visibility. It also means every mistake is examined through a much brighter spotlight. Supporters can argue that she is being judged more harshly because of her family. Critics can argue that enormous privilege should come with an even higher standard of responsibility. Both arguments can exist at the same time. The real test now is what happens next. If Phia fully audits the disputed transactions, compensates partners where necessary, improves its compliance systems, and explains the timeline honestly, the company may still have a future. But if important questions remain unanswered, the controversy could become much more than a bad chapter in a young founder's career. It could become the defining story of Phia. And perhaps that is the deepest lesson here. The Gates name can open doors. Millions of dollars can provide a runway. Celebrity investors can create attention. But none of those things can replace trust. And once trust disappears, the most valuable thing a startup has is suddenly the hardest thing to buy back. So the real story may not be whether Phoebe Gates' company survived its biggest scandal. It may be whether she learned the difference between building something powerful and building something people can believe in. Do you think the Phia controversy was mainly a serious software failure? Or do the reported internal messages suggest something much deeper? Let me know what you think in the comments below.